As we go through the drawings, we're going to kind of review the do's and don'ts. So in your technical drawing, about chapter 10, we have on this edition about page 398 and 399, the do's and don'ts of dimensioning. So each dimension should be given clearly so that it can be interpreted in only one way. Dimensions should not be duplicated, nor should the same information be given in two different ways, except for dual dimensioning, which is inch and metric. And no dimensions should be given except those needed to produce or inspect the part. Dimensions should be given between points or surfaces that have a functional relation to each other or that control the location of mating parts. Dimensions should be given to finish surfaces or important center lines in preference to rough surfaces wherever possible. And dimensions should be given so that it will not be necessary for the machinist to calculate, scale, or assume any dimension. Alright, so if we do a few of those each time, we'll try to highlight those items as we're going through the process. And from the ASME Y14.5 dimensioning and tolerancing standard, these are kind of the broken down, maybe a little bit easier to read. So refer back to those. It's kind of one of those, again, should be common sense, but not always. All right, so I'm going to pull up the A landscape, and I mentioned that if we want to use the view palette on a regular basis, that we can uncheck the start command when creating new drawing. Then when the drawing opens, you're not going to see this sidebar. You would come over to the view palette in the task pane, select your part, drag and drop the view that you want. So for right now, I'm going to leave this on, and we're going to browse to 61. And so that'll bring in our first part, and I clicked a little bit quick there. And so I'll go ahead and drop the isometric off. Alright, so since I completely missed, we'll bring that back, and it was kind of my intention. So even after I placed the view for the standard front view, I was able to go into the project view and start to get the isometric. Alright, so I didn't really want a side view. That's not going to add any benefit to my drawing. The centers, and I've set those on occasion in the options to the center lines to the center layer, and whatever is current pretty much comes out. So that may be one to look into, see if the format or the per standard input comes in with it. Alright, so intent here is that I'm going to generate a section view. So when I pick the section view, it's going to ask me about the cutting plane. Section and half section. Ah, interesting. So that looks new for 2020. We'll have to explore that one a little bit more. My standard detail will be the horizontal. I'm going to place it, and then I'm not doing any of the other offsets, notches, or need to undo. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK, and we're going to drag this out. Alright, so the section text always looks a little bit large to me, but I guess not too bad. So if we fold this up into the top view, and we're showing it as looking that way, that's the readable, but it also generates a little bit of confusion for me. So if we were to go this way with it, and make it more like the front view, then when this folds up, this top view folding back, then we would be looking at this view. So that works a little bit better. My hatch lines came in as the dims layer as well, which, okay, we'll see how that one goes. Alright, so I've got my my few views. My general practice is to go ahead and bring in each of the items. So in this case we have 6 parts to detail. And so let's go over to the view palette and we'll hit the dot 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 and bring in the holder clip. One thing with the holder clip, and you'll see it with the view palette as a flat pattern. In the model view, there'll be a checkbox up in the upper left that'll let you pick for that that geometry. So I'm bringing in the flat pattern first, and don't really need to project that one. And we have enough lines and text that we're probably going to need to clean this up just a little bit, make it a little more readable. Okay, and that gives us the unfolded, flattened piece. And then I also want to have the standard views, so let's go ahead and bring in a front view, and we'll drag and drop. And it takes me into projected. Don't know that the side view is going to be of much value. Can kind of tell what's going on with the step. I'll go ahead and drop it in there, and we'll get our view. So this is going to get a little busy. I don't want to lose the scale, but when we go to detail this, we're going to have to make some decisions as to what the critical dimensions are. So let's go ahead and set that over to center. Bring in the next. So we go back to model view, and I browse now to the cam. And this time we'll do create multiple views. And so in the more views, this is for the sheet metal. You would see that a flattened flat pattern as a selection and be able to drag it in. So since we're doing a standard part, we're just going to bring in the views. Go ahead and select those. Put them on the center layer. And then see if I've got my Windows Explorer. We'll do a few different ways. So the index arm, come in from a drag and drop, and if we go ahead and create the multiple views, in this case, since I'm not really looking at the preview or the size, if we decide we don't need one, we can always delete the view out later. Alright, so this will give me a chance to visualize those guys. Let's see if the File Explorer. And so those are things that are in the background. We actually opened up the no, I guess that one's highlighted, but since everything's grayed out, it's not really picking it up. I'll get back over to my parts, and out of the File Explorer, we had the index. Let's go ahead with the roller lever, and then the last one in the sheet. We'll just go back to the model view on that one. Alright, so we'll pull in the support. Let's go ahead and create the multi-view and select. Okay, so I thought I'd done away with the 63, so that's the extra one is coming in from somewhere, and it's not on the first sheet, so must be carrying with the sheet format. Okay, so our details, we are in the dims layer. So from the annotation, we'll go into the smart dimension. We did have those couple of bilaterals, so I'm going to go with the model items, and we're only going to bring in the marked for drawing. So that's kind of an interesting place to put it. But let's go ahead and check our document units. And thought we had changed this already for the inches, but let's go to 3 decimal places and 2 decimal places for the millimeters. And that did not quite bring the extension lines up so that we have a nice looking gap. Okay, so that looks pretty good. We'll go to the outside. And again, because our drawing units are in inches, even though it was designed in metric, it's going to highlight and pull out the inch dimensions. Alright, so if we do a hole callout, since this was not a hole wizard, we're not really going to get much additional information, so I'm going to have to add those. And we get a little box that pops up. Then I'm going to be able to come in and go 2 times, or from the, if we want it on top, if we want it right next to, then we can add those. And if I wanted to denote through, I can add that in. So it jumped around a little bit, but not too bad. And then we'll pick the next one. We'll look for the box, and we'll go 2 times again. Also, I hit the reference dimension on that one. In the process, it's right there, so if I'm getting button happy, it's going to pick that one. So since we have the center lines, we have all of our geometry. That's probably going to do it for pieces, unless we come up with some kind of positional. This one has the cylinder that it's going through, so let's go ahead and pick it and see if it'll add the center mark. And we'll set our center. Maybe not. Alright, one of those is going to pick. And since that was on center line, let's go ahead and see if we can add the true center line in and have it pick up. Alright, so that's kind of an inference that on the center line will be at the center of the part. So, and I want to reverse the arrow. Alright, so given those geometries, since those are the more critical on the outside, and we have our necessary diameters. Now again, since that one was kind of on both sides, I can come over to the side and do 2 times, since it's interrupted as it comes around the cylinder. And that put me out of the dimensions, so let's go ahead and set our heights. And would like to make these kind of consistent. Okay. And then our dimension to the center of the hole. Okay, so that one's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and do a Control Q. We'll double check. The bearing comes in. I have not saved this, so let's go ahead and do a Save As. And it's going to ask to update the views if there's anything that was mixed there. So we are now doing 61 through 66. And we'll go ahead and let it update and save any of the components that it needs to, zoom to fit. Alright, so this does not have any information associated to it yet, except for possibly the material that I set. Come back over. And we'll set the till, so 6.61. And finish, we'll do raw. Okay, so once I save that and close it, we'll come back, do another Control Q. And now the drawn by is the part number. Any of those other items should be populated in the title block now. Alright, so with the sheet metal being a little more complicated, we are going to be punching, lasering, plasmaing, some process to cut out this shape with its complexities. And so we want to pull up those dimensions based on our geometry, and then the finished dimensions will be for the bend. So I think I'm going to come back to this one. I may want to spread this over 2 sheets. So we'll revisit it. Our size scale is a little bit large on this one, so if I come down to the lower right, I can make it go to half scale. If it is set to the sheet scale, so since it came in as a custom scale, we're going to set to the sheet. And now it's a little bit on the small side. I kind of like the size of the isometric. So in this case, I can go back into right-click and do the properties, and maybe let's see if 3/4 works a little bit better. Alright, so that one was obviously set to follow the parent. Nope, we're just going to do the 1/2 for that one, so I can vary that a little bit if I need more room. Alright, so from the manufacturing side, we're going to give it the overall dimensions, so height and width, and then we'll set the centers. And that kicked me out, so let's see, let's get back into our dimension, and I'll go ahead and zoom up since I didn't quite make that selection. And we'll give it depth. Now this one was generated with the whole wizard, so we'll get a little bit more information if I go to that setup. Alright, and then this was picked up. So in this case, if it just went through one side, we would give it through near wall as a definition. We'll set our depths. I think we had the 0.62, and we're going to need an angle. So I'm going to reverse those just to clean it up a little bit. That doesn't look too bad on the location. Set our arc. Kind of clean these up as we go. Alright, so this ends up with the radius going out to the center. So this might be one that I would want to use the foreshortened. So let's see if we can identify that. Changed it around a little bit for 2020. I'm not seeing it here, so that means in liters we should be able to foreshorten. Kind of an interesting place for the center. I believe I can move that. Alright, so just so it doesn't interfere with the other one, the assumption is that it's going to center, it's a 2-inch radius, and we're okay with those numbers. Alright, so if I want to go center line, pick the two outside edges. And apparently didn't have that selected. Okay, so there we go. We'll make it a little bit longer. And we already have the width. So since we're concentrating on this geometry in the center, we need to locate and then to set. So we'll put in a little bit of a stagger, maybe make it easier to read. And at some point, probably going to run out of some room. So go that direction. And then from the back side and to the step. Alright, and then just so that one's picking up, not bringing it off the edge, so I'm going to escape. We'll go back and pick the two lines. And then now I can bring in the 45-degree angle. So in this case, it looks like a duplicate dimension, but there's kind of an assumption there that this line follows it all the way around and should blend. I think in this case, we're verifying that the 0.62 is there, so that would be one to double check, and just depending on how it's reading, since it appears that way out of the isometric, but it's not specific. So, and that one really could be a through all. Alright, so we'll come back. Let's see what we have for our, we're using the sheet scale on this one, so don't remember, I have to go back and watch the video, see which order we did these in, of which ones are being set to the custom scale and which ones are being set to the sheet scale. So let's go to half scale. Looks pretty good. And from the machining standpoint, because we're dealing with those arcs, it's going to be a little tough. I'm going to stay with the inserting the model items, so we'll get our limit dimension. And this is the default. If we wanted to make this the manufacturing, then I'm going to need to come over and pick my machined. Right, so since that didn't follow, we'll do machined link to parent and machined link to parent. And so if we go back and change, then those will update as well. Right, so smart dimension to the outside. See which side those are going to look better on. And then from center mark, depth. Now this one's going to need a center mark, but it also looks like, I guess if we go from there, if this was a partial because of the blend, I may not be getting a true center line. So I'll select. And did that pick up? Not quite yet. Okay, so let's see if we go that route. Nope, still not picking it. Alright, so something in this, there was a duplicate, or I managed to create a line on top of it. Okay, we'll make sure that that's selected. I get my center line, and then we'll start pulling some of the smart dimensions from that location. Alright, so from a manufacturing standpoint, this presents a little bit of a problem because our datum center line of the bore is perpendicular to the edge, and then because this one can vary 5 or 10 thousandths depending on what we decide to leave, we're going to have some method to pick up that bore and come back to these dimensions. So we'll have to think through that process. All right, and then the spot face. And we have the through. And Control Z that one, we'll switch back over to the hole call out. 0.44 through. And I know that I am modifying it, and it's about to get turned off. So, all right, so a little bit different. This is going to be the mix because of the hole call out. We're not quite staying with that ISO standard on this one, so we'd have to decide if that's the best method. Alright, so let's go ahead and we'll go from there up. Alright, so the first pass is to get some dimensions, start thinking about our overall dimensioning scheme and tolerances that we're going to need. And one of the reasons why I set up all of the sheets is that as I'm going through this process, if the mating part to this piece is before or after, I can kind of go back and forth and see what the critical dimensions are going to work into. So it gives me a chance to analyze as I go. Alright, so that one gets the full R. And again, the stack up on this one, plus or minus 5 on the radius, would be equal to plus or minus 10 on the diameter. So if I really want to control this, I almost need to do this. Apply it as the width, and then come back and nope, not going to let me take it out of that one. Alright, and then we'll highlight, come over to the side, and I'm going to override the value. Alright, so just denoting that it's a full radius from the width. Change its spacing. Alright, well, so we need a dimension, and not quite picking up that edge. So since it's not really letting me do anything as far as like a silhouette, then we'll go between the lines and get that depth. Alright, so for another center line, let's go ahead and drag that through. Make sure it's highlighted, set it to center. I'm not sure why it's not giving me those. There we go. Either that or I'm just getting button happy, so we will maybe not push all the buttons. Alright, so that gets me to the center line, establishes at least that basic consideration. So at this point, we haven't added in anything, but I still need the notch on the bottom. So that is going to end up being useful. So center line. And at this point, I'm applying more dimensions than I am center lines, so I think I'm going to still stay in the dims and just watch what I'm doing when I'm selecting those. set our width, set our center, and when we do a stack up of tolerances, we'd be able to go through and analyze what that is actually going to do for the part. Okay, let's take a quick pass for the next. Oh, the fun one. So this one has quite a few dimensions on it. Let's see, it was brought in, so it is at sheet scale. Let's go to 1/2. Alright, so datum wise, this is still a challenge that probably these are our squarest corners. So I think I would like to try to do this one as maybe an ordinate, because we accumulated so many pieces here. So underneath the dimension in the pull down, we'll be able to pick an ordinate dimension. And I'll just start bringing out locations. Okay. And because of that segment, we almost need to be in a front view. Actually, I think I'm going to go jump over to the last one, and we're going to come back and finish this one out in a separate video. Okay, so we're getting our sizing. This one had a couple of, and I think the other one did too, now that I think about it, no dimensions inserted. So what that tells me is I either forgot or I did not apply them when I did the cut. So since that one's still in purple, I'm going to right click on it, make sure it's selected as marked for drawing, and right click and mark for drawing. Rebuild it before I save it, and then when I close it, let's try the model items one more time, and now we're going to get those values. Okay, so I think that looks a little better, but reversing it, don't really like dragging it across the part like that. So, alright, so that gives me the width. Go ahead and apply a few more here. See if we can reverse that. That one looks pretty tight, so let's reverse it back, and then we'll see if we can reverse the larger. Trying to get them to line up a little bit cleaner on the extension lines, and with the overlap kind of connect that way. Alright, so we have our overall. Let's go ahead and get into the dimension, set our overall height, kind of leaving room over here for the 30 degrees. Make sure it picks that one up. Nope. Okay, from the top over to the angle, and then from the side over to the angle. Let's go ahead and make that an interior as well. Okay, we have those. Let's go ahead and set our center lines. And since we did not get a center mark for the slot, we'll go ahead and accept. Pick the center lines, make sure that we get those over into the correct layer. Oh, that one went to the step, not to the length. So let's go ahead and get that one in. And now our choice would be to dimension on the same size or put in the 2 times mark on that one as well. Alright, so let's go ahead and build that out. And not quite what I was looking for on that one. So it shifted right at the last minute. Better to place it and then drag it out and get it a little bit closer to what we want to end up with. Alright, so if I go into the center mark and we go to slots, and still not getting my preview. So let's see if it will pick, and then make sure it sets to center. Nope, still not going for me. Alright, so I'm going to figure that one out. Alright, and then we can set the dimension. I want this one to be more of a baseline than the chain dimension. Oops, clicked it one too many times. Alright, we'll bring that one up a little bit closer. And then did I get an overall width? No, so let's go ahead and put that one in. Try and position that a little more readable overall. Okay, so except for the sheet metal and the roller lever, we've got a good pass on these for dimensioning, and then we can come back and start looking at our critical dimensions for tolerances.